So what I want to talk about today is the only two ways that you should go around a corner. But most importantly, to understand like the principle, both both of those ways have the same underlying principle. So the only two ways that you should go around the corner that I'll talk about is number one, trail braking, and number two, the slow look, press and roll. And I'm going to explain trail braking, how it works. I'm going to explain the slow look, press and roll. And I'm going to explain why people have issues. A lot of people have issues with the slow look, press and roll. And when I say issues, I mean people hate this method. They favor the trail braking. So I'm going to talk about the two differences. But firstly, I want to dispel a few myths. The first myth is that you shouldn't touch the brakes around the corner. I've heard a lot, like back in the day, where people say you should not touch the brakes around the corner, but that is just plain wrong. There are right ways of using the brake around the corner, but there are also wrong ways of doing it, which of course if you do it the wrong way you could crash. The weirdest thing I've heard though is when people say that pressing the brake around the corner causes the bike to stand up. The only reason that a bike will stand up when you press the brakes around the corner is when you don't know how to steer, when you don't know how to control the bike. Now there are forces that are applied on the bike when you press the brake around the corner, on the suspension, but these are like parasitic scavenging forces that might want to pull the bike upright. But for that to happen, you have to have zero input on the steering, which is why I'm saying that it only happens for people who don't know how to steer, and that is by using proper counter steering methods. And this is actually a really common problem. For a lot of people out there riding, it's the bike that's controlling them. It's not them that's controlling the bike. That's why people complain about, the bike stands up when they brake. And I admit, I used to be like that. In the first few months of riding, the bike was controlling me until, I nearly crashed. And then I asked myself the question, like, how do you actually steer? How do you control where you want the bike to go into? And that's where I learnt about counter steering. So welcome to my channel where we talk about bikes and Bible verses, and I want to talk about the two ways that you should turn a corner. And first thing I want to say is both of these techniques that I mentioned both achieve a similar thing, but in a slightly different way. The main thing that they achieve is that they load the tire into the ground. Having the tire loaded into the ground increases the grip available. The first method, trail braking, loads the front wheel into the ground, and the slow look, press and roll loads the back wheel into the ground. The biggest mistake that I see when people go around the corner is when they take it neutral. That is, they do all their braking when they're upright, they go neutral around the corner, like not accelerating, not braking, just what they call maintenance throttle, just keeping the same speed, which is neutral, and then once they're out of the corner they accelerate. You should not be doing this type of braking on a motorcycle. This concept is taken from like car racing and go-karts and things like that. People assume that it applies to motorcycles, but it doesn't. The other mistake that people do around the corner is they unintentionally jack the bike back and forward, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. This is the main reason why people just suddenly crash when they're going around the corner. The main reason why you need to do these cornering methods and why you shouldn't jack the bike back and forward is because of this concept of weightlessness. Bikes have a phenomena of weightlessness. When you flick a bike into a corner, you get this weightlessness on the tires. When you jack a bike back and forward in a corner, you get this weightlessness. And these methods that I'm going to talk about are used to overcome this weightlessness that a bike has. Cars also have weightlessness, but it's only on one side. Since cars have four wheels, when one side is being weightless, the other side is actually gaining more weight onto the tires. And so cars have this cancelling or compensating effect of this weightlessness that occurs. But bikes don't have that luxury. Hence, this is why you have to do these techniques. The first technique is trail braking. This is when you keep the front brake trailing through the corner. The most important thing that you need to know about this is that it doesn't mean you need to do less braking before your corner. People might think, well, because I'm braking throughout the whole corner, it means I can brake less before the corner. You still need to do most of your braking, if not all of your braking, before the corner. Because trailing on the brakes through the corner is not actually braking. It's not like the main braking force. The purpose of having the brakes trail is to borrow some of that energy that's on the bike and use it to compress the suspension on the front. So it's not a braking force when you're trail braking. It's not like a braking force that's used to slow the bike down. It's a braking force that's used to keep the suspension and the front wheel loaded onto the ground. And the way you should do it for a beginner is, after you finish doing all your braking before the corner, you settle into the trailing braking position. Once the bike is settled, the suspension is settled, then you can go smoothly through the corner without upsetting or jerking the bike back and forward. It's like a constant smooth force going around the corner. That's what gives you the maximum traction. More advanced people don't take this constant approach, but take like this overlap between adding cornering and trailing off the brakes. The main point to remember is that even when you're trail braking, you don't have infinite grip. Braking uses up available grip. Cornering uses up available grip. There needs to be a balance in between. Heavy braking should mean you shouldn't be cornering that much. Heavy cornering means you shouldn't be braking. So you need to be trail braking not to the point where you're slowing the bike down, but just to keep the bike suspension loaded. What people unintentionally do is they let go of the brakes mid-corner if they've been trail braking. This gives a sudden reduction in the traction that's available and people just dump it. The other thing that trail braking does is it narrows the wheelbase, which makes the bike more nimble and easier to like flick into turns. The second technique is the slow look, press and roll, which means that you slow the bike down a lot while it's still straight. You look into the corner, you press, which I assume the handlebar for counter steering, to flick the bike in. After you flick the bike in and the suspension is stabilized, you give a progressive light throttle and you throttle your way, accelerate through the corner even before the apex. I admit that this slow look, press and roll is a bit of a dated way, where trail braking is the most dominant one used now, but I think it's like a step up from what people used to think when they used to take the neutral load around the corner. I think they had the right idea by trying to load the wheel down, giving it more traction, but I feel like maybe this technique needs a bit more work. But overall, the consensus is that trail braking is the most superior. And when you're out on the track, you're free to experiment on both. But I believe that on the street, you should be exclusively trail braking. That is, using the front brake. The main advantage of trail braking is if something suddenly comes up, your bike's already set up to be able so that you can press the brakes in the corner. You've already got an advantage. Whereas if you were doing the slow look, press and roll, and you're accelerating, and you want to go from accelerating to braking, that's going to upset the suspension and give that weightlessness, and there's a higher chance of crashing the bike just because of that transfer from acceleration to braking during the corner. So braking is massively delayed, but trail braking gives you a big advantage if you need to stop mid-corner. So anyway, don't take my word for it. There's a lot of videos that explain this and why trail braking should be used. So as usual, I want to get into our Bible verse for today, and it's from Matthew 5 verses 21 to 22, and it's when Jesus talks about and says, you know, that you've heard it said that you should not murder, and if anyone who commits murder is subject to judgment. But then Jesus says, I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother or sister is subject to judgment. Anyone who says to his brother or sister raka, which is an Aramaic word for like a contempt, is answerable to the court. Anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the fire of hell. Now, in modern terms, people just say, "Oh, you idiot." But it says here in the Bible that you are in the danger of hell. I believe, like, even though this is something really small, it's something that we should just look to make these minor improvements in our life. You don't need to say to someone that they're an idiot. People make mistakes. People maybe need to be told that they're doing the wrong thing. But we just need to remove these we just need to remove these words from our vocabulary. So if you want to learn more about what I've been talking about today, tips on how to ride safer, I've added this video to my riding playlist, so please feel free to check that out, subscribe to it. If you like this video, please give it a like and make a comment, and if you like my content in general, please subscribe and take it easy and ride safe.